Welcome, everybody. We have today customizing the Django admin. Lakshman Prasad here is going to tell us all about it. There's a lot of people here that knows a little about Django. Some hands. Oh, cool, awesome. So, well, we'll learn everything about how to customize the Django admin. It's really sweet. So please welcome.
Thank you for the introduction. Hello, everyone. My name is Lakshman Prasad, as he rightly introduced. I work for McKinsey & Company as an architect. So I have used Django admins, have been involved in the Django and the Python community since the 1.0 days. I really like the Django admin, and we're trying to see I'm not really going to cover too much of the technical aspects, although, yes, we are going to look into the technical aspect, much more about, you can always get the technical aspects about how to customize on the documentation, but what you don't often get is why you would want to do such a thing. I will try to see how I can try to make justice to do it, speaking about it today. You might know me from my Twitter ID or from my earlier days at Agilic when I used to actively blog about web development, if you know about me at all. Otherwise, nice. So the Django admin, the Django documentation, even before it says what the admin is, goes on to suggest it is one of the most powerful parts of Django. Do you guys agree? How many people agree Django admin is one of the strongest parts of Django? I see. How many people agree that at some point it used to be at least one of the strongest, most powerful parts of Django? I see, exactly. I know, the feeling is about right. It suffered a lot in the recent popular perception today. In Adrian Holavati's talk at Google in 2008 on the Django Con, he asked the question, how many people came to Django because of Python? The answer was an overwhelming 50% of the audience, or more than that. The question that wasn't asked is how many people came to Django itself because of the Django admin. I don't know the answer, but I'm willing to guess, to make a guess that it would be much higher than the number of people came to Python because of Django. In those days, hardly ever a discussion took place about Django that did not mention the Django admin. In one of the discussions about the future of Django admin on the mailing list, there are quite a few of them. In one of them, Jeff Croft rightly pointed out that nothing from the web from 5 years ago is still awesome by today's standards. So since in the year 2008, when Django admin was such a most powerful part, which brought a lot of people into using Django and thereby using Python itself, how does it fare today to the standards of 2013? So what all does Django get wrong? What is the popular perception of what are the things that Django admin is lacking in? As rightly pointed by somebody on the mailing list, it doesn't get the padding right. Can you see where the levels of the heading in the top header as well as the bottom header? The padding is not exactly the same in the top header as well as in the subsequent headers. It's a powerful tool. It has authorization, filtering, authentication, and all forms of customization you can do, but you should not use it for external application. Isn't that the common prevalent wisdom? Admin is not to be used is only to be used by trusted internal users. There are charges that Django admin is really hard to customize. Like I said, there are plenty of articles that describe to you how to change the models, what model admin parameters to override, and then what templates to customize and where to put them. But when you actually get to the point of how do I implement this functionality in admin, there is really not that much resource in order for you to go and find out. Unless you know what terms to search for on Stack Overflow, because everything is there. So anything with the word admin in it, unfortunately, is going to be compared to the WordPress admin. It's not even the same thing. Django admin isn't an application like WordPress admin is. Django admin is much more like a tool in order to build such kinds of admin, in fact, something even more. But that doesn't stop people from comparing Django admin and saying its user experience is not nearly as good as WordPress admin. Yeah. Other than the minor revolutionary enhancements Django admin has received, it has been more or less the same ever since the day it debuted more than half a decade ago. The last major change was the new forms admin when 1.0 was about to come out. Since then till today, there's only minor revolutionary changes. There are hardly anything path-breaking right now. It doesn't get enough love. This is also a charge that many of the other contrib applications receive. Should there be a contrib at all? That's another beast. But I don't want to get into that discussion. That's out of the scope of current discussion. So I see people are thinking, wasn't this supposed to be a talk about the goods you can do using Django Admin? Why is this guy talking about all the things Django Admin is lacking? To be clear, I was only saying those are all the popular perceptions about Django Admin with the necessary screenshot evidence where possible. I'm not saying all of them are true. In fact, I am going to contest, despite all of these, even though some of them are true, Django Admin is still a fine tool that enables the developer very good functional application in the true spirit of Django. It's a great tool for achieving the stated objective of Django. What is the stated objective of Django? You've all read it on the website. To enable perfectionist developers to deliver on deadlines, right? So some of these things, that whatever charges we saw, they're irrelevant. Some of them can be changed easily, and some of them you can change easily, and then, of course, it can get a little more love. So we just went through some of the common perceived issues of admin over the course of the rest 20 minutes or so. I'm going to cover the most important thing about this, setting the perspective. We will also look at what are the things Django Admin actually gets right. So the things that it lacks doesn't really matter. Once you start doing customizations, you will know to make it clever if you look at it rightly, and you will also find a lot of external applications that aid you in doing it. And then we will look at some of the applications that try to enhance the admin in the true spirit that admin was meant to be. If the time is remaining, we will go through what are the things that Django Admin can use for some in the next versions. I know I don't have to explain it to this audience, but we all know that software spans spectrum. On the one hand, you have the GCC and the assemblies that change the bits on the hardware and the RPythons that do compilation. You unroll the loop for speed at runtime. But some of the smartest people work on it, therefore we don't have to work on this infrastructure. The rest of the people work on the business application part of it, so it can solve the real-world problems. Thanks to the very nature of the abstractions we build, we can stand on the shoulder of the giants. We can run Django Admin using PyPy. So the job of the frameworks is obviously to understand the common theme that exists and to create transparent abstractions. Django is a framework. Django Admin is also a framework. Admin may be an application. It's a part of the Django framework, yes. It's a part of the Django contrib, yes. It has all the aforesaid mentioned flaws, yes. But most importantly, admin is an idea. It's a wonderful idea. It was the first of its kind. We will get into the technical aspects of the admin, but please bear with me when I try to make this point from an end user point of view, why that admin is really a wonderful technology. Because it is important. The technological solutions we try to build are primarily motivated to solve a real world problem. Around here, maybe to solve some first world problems, but mostly real world problems. So all of the programs use abstraction and inheritance. Admin does it at a very high level. It notices that most applications themselves are similar, that enabling somebody with an environment easy to develop in order to do a basic task themselves can mean really a lot. You know, reducing the cost of maintenance and development in today's world, we know time to market is everything. We also know the mythical man month. You cannot just go on adding developer into your project in order to make it very fast. In several cases, adding more developers into your project could actually make it slow. So a software that offers abstraction at the level of Django Admin, which is at the level of the application itself, would surely aid in making it faster and costing it better. I'm not sure if before Django Admin anything quite like this existed. Yes, there were applications, there were reusable apps, redeployable ones, but the ability to bootstrap a working application, this is the first. Surely a lot of other frameworks have these today, but credit where it is due, Django Admin was indeed the first, which I believe is the reason many people are here today, because they bought into that idea. You know the release of the Django itself was influenced by Rails, right? Rails did that by scaffolding. Today, even the most popular admin applications for all the frameworks have something like Django, which is a clear endorsement of the direction it was headed. Yes, there are a few exceptions. Notable people like Idan tend to do both development as well as design, but mostly it's not a developer thing to do in UI. Even those people whoever do it, who do both of them, try to do it at alternative times. Of course, you have Bootstrap and the like today to address similar problems where a developer didn't know much of the UI. You can eliminate padding and all of those CSS stuff by trying to include the class names, span 4, span 6, but you still cannot do away with actually writing the HTML, the tables, etc. Look at the Django admin. Is that code? If it is code, it's only specification. It's specification. If it is code, it's only incidental. You write what are the field sets, what are the fields, what it should be. By this one, you also get an entire application with a validation. So this qualifies as an application for any definition of application. I know a lot of database viewers exist, but they do not allow you to implement the business logic, and you cannot add validation. So for any definition of any standard definition of application, Django admin qualifies as the application. This is the simplest application you can write. So Django already clearly recognizes that the design is different from development by creating a templating language that is so independent of Python. You don't have to write code. In fact, you should not. You're not allowed to write any Python code inside template. This is an acknowledgement of the same idea further. So that was rather longer than I thought it should be, but I hope it drives the point I was trying to make. The admin, despite its shortcoming, whatever it is, even though it is quite old already and so many frameworks copy it, in its idea, it's really a wonderful technology because conceptually and philosophically, the problem it tries to solve are the problems that exist, are really profound problems. If you're going to take one thing from this talk, let that be this. While admin has its shortcomings and there are ways to overcome those, admin, the idea has been really powerful and served Django and its users really well. I know a lot of people here don't really think of it as such a big deal. That's why if you look into the Google Analytics, a lot of the popularity of admin has been so much more outside of the United States than it is here. Since a lot of new people may not even have used admin so far because of all the long conceptions about it, I want to briefly go over, explain what the admin is to those that don't know about it. Here is one of the simpler admin files. You extend the model admin that is built in the Django admin, that extends the Django admin module. You then set one of its many class parameters into the values you want. There are many of them. The commonly used ones are list display. This displays the corresponding model attribute in a list interface. That could be a database column or a method. Similarly, you have read only the fields in the form. I know Danny's session was not there, but if you attended his session or any other similar, what you can do with the forms Kung Fu, you know you can do literally anything. Therefore, since you can provide your own forms, Django admin, just through the forms Kung Fu itself, you can get a long way using the Django admin because it's just an interface to that. And before even you get to enable all of this stuff, you enable the admin itself in the settings.py in the install applications, and then you uncomment the few lines in the urls.py. One of them is pointing to the particular admin URL. The other one is you call the admin.autodiscover. What does the autodiscover do? It goes through all of the installed applications on your environment, and it gets, which is specified in the settings.py, and it gets all the admin.py files of each of those. So after the other things that admin has, a list filter, which you can see there, I'm sure you already know about it. We really don't want to get into much of this one. So, and then there is the admin actions, which you see, which is basically you select the different objects and select an action you want to apply to all of those models. You can also include the custom JavaScript for a specific model template you're dealing with. Mezzanine makes a very good use of the custom JavaScript inclusion to enable the drag and drop and manage the hierarchy. So that was a quick overview of what the admin does. Knowing what we know so far, how do we customize the Django admin? What all does exist? What all does exist? We know that there is templates, and then there is the model admin class, and then there is a custom media. We can customize each and every one of these. Some of the advanced changes require you to customize all of this, but when knowing certain things about how the admin works, you can go a long way by just using some of the techniques rather than trying to do everything for each and every requirement. So how do you do a little more customization? What we extend is the model admin, which is extended in turn by, which extends the base model admin. The base model admin specifies a lot of fields, the raw ID fields, the filter vertical, horizontal, etc. So you can specify values to each of these. as a if you specify the fields and the exclude, correspondingly they will be displayed in the object page as a standard practice, like Daniel Grenfell mentions in his book too, which is the best practice for Django admin. It's generally good to avoid using exclude than to use fields instead, because when you add more fields to the model, it's going to come back to bite you, unless if you're using an abstract model admin based class, that is. So the base model admin most notably also has some of the permission related methods that you override. In the long run, it is better to understand and customize the permissions itself than to try and override the base, the permission methods for individual model admin that you're creating. But if you have any specific requirement, you can always go ahead and override those permission methods on each of the model admin that you create. So similarly, the model admin extends the base model admin, as we discussed. It adds a lot more fields, which also you can change. There are search fields, date hierarchy, attributes, save as, inlines, paginator, and all of this stuff. I'm sure you can look up what each of those do. So list filter, as we saw earlier, enables you to filter on a specific database model. So all of this is really well-written source, so I really encourage you to look into the source. Don't be afraid. This is all very good code. You will be able to look up whatever you want to do in the source of the Django. And then admin site is the thing which creates the site itself. So this is the pretty good thing is all of these are pretty well documented. Admin site has a lot of templates that you can override. So basically there is base model admin, admin site, which define a lot of attributes which you can override in order to provide the values that you want. So you can always provide the specification thing. This is the field that I want a list display on and all of that stuff, but that really doesn't go a long way, because many times you don't know at runtime whether you want to, what template you have to provide, whether the user has the permission to something, or whether you have to send an email to someone. So the very good thing is that all of these have a corresponding dynamic method counterpart. So the Django admin calls during each request at the runtime all of these methods in order to find out the values of those statically set attributes. So what does this mean to you? You can override the model admin and then override these specific methods to get the to get the values for those static parameters that you have already defined. If these are defined, these take precedence over the static parameter that you've set, and they are ignored. So how do you create class filters? As of Django 1.4, in order to create a filter, you just extend a simple list filter, and then you define two attributes to it, two methods on it. One of them is a lookup, one of them is a query set. The lookup, you get what you want to display in the filter side of it, and then in the query set, you actually return the data that you want to display by filtering and excluding whatever you want to. This is as simple as it gets in order to create a list filter. Similarly, adding custom actions is also pretty simple. You add a new method to the model admin and then set a short description on it so that you see that in the drop-down name, and then you add it as an action attribute also. So now what if you want to change the template, customize the template? If you want to add a lot of variables into the template, you see that there is in all of the dynamic methods we saw, some of them are add view, change view, etc. Each of these have extra context parameter. So you override the add view To add more such views. For example, navigation view controller itself is something that would be really good. So some of the images we used were present in the Flickr Commons. Thanks to these guys for that. I work at McKinsey today, but you probably know me from, if you know me, my earlier days at Agile, where I used to blog about Django development, and then I've developed several custom proprietary Django applications, usually following on Twitter. Yeah, I think that's all I've got. If we have time for questions, we can take that, but I'll let him answer that.
Yes. So we have one mic there. If there's any questions, one mic here if necessary.
Hi, I just have a quick question. You mentioned the bootstrap skinning for the admin and that there's so many packages right now. Do you have a favorite, or are they all just too new to really like one more?
Actually, I have more than one favorite right now. I don't want to pick a name because they might be better. You don't know what is going to happen tomorrow. I tend to use several of them at different projects. I like different things about different ones. I don't want to pick a favorite right now.
Can you tell me secretly your small list?
No, go check them out, all of them. I mean, there are indicators already, how many folks are there, how many people are using it, really.
Hi, so if you're building, if you're building this out, do you have recommendations? You touched briefly on permissions and that you could override the existing permissions, but you could start building your own. So do you have any more specific recommendations on if you want to build something up that is sure is secure, is sure you're not going to be like, oh, admin's doing stuff that I didn't realize? Like, how would you handle that side of things?
Okay. So is the question, when would you use admin versus when would you build your own?
Yeah, specifically regarding like locking stuff down, making sure the wrong people don't do the wrong things.
So my answer to that would be not every application in the world is a social networking application where you have a lot of people coming into the front end and doing a lot of tasks and where you have to configure a few things in the back end. For those kinds of things, admin is specifically to be used only for internal users. But there are a lot of real world applications where a lot of people want to log into your system, enter some data, etc. If that is all it takes, there's no reason you should not be using admin. There are very good ways in order to configure the permissions and then change the templates and add any hooks. And I believe and I recommend that we should need more such standardized views in the future. But for whatever exists, if your work gets done using those things, I don't think figuring out how to do the permissions, etc., is going to be a big task.
So you would use the standard existing tools, not okay.
That's right. Thank you, everyone. It was very good. As you rightly introduced, I work for McKinsey & Company as an architect. So I have used Django admins, have been involved in the Django and the Python community since the 1.0 days. I really like the Django admin, and we're trying to see I'm not really going to cover too much of the technical aspects, although yes, we are going to look into the technical aspect, which much more about, you can always get the technical aspects about how to customize on the documentation, but what you don't often get is why you would want to do such a thing. I will try to see how I can try to make justice to speaking about it today. You might know me from my Twitter ID or from my earlier days at Agile.
Welcome, everybody. We have today customizing the Django admin. Lakshman Prasad here is going to tell us all about it. There's a lot of people here that knows a little about Django. Some hands. Oh, cool, awesome. So, well, we'll learn everything about how to customize the Django admin. It's really sweet. So, please welcome.
Thank you for the introduction. Hello, everyone. My name is Lakshman Prasad. People came to Django because of Python. The answer was an overwhelming 50% of the audience, or more than that. The question that wasn't asked is how many people came to Django itself because of the Django admin. I don't know the answer, but I'm willing to guess, to make a guess that it would be much higher than the number of people came to Python because of Django. In those days, hardly ever a discussion took place about Django that did not mention the Django admin. In one of the discussions about the future of Django admin on the mailing list, There are quite a few of them. In one of them, Jeff Croft rightly pointed out that nothing from the web from 5 years ago is still awesome by today's standards. So when I used to actively blog about web development, if you know about me at all, otherwise, nice. So the Django admin, the Django documentation, even before it says what the admin is, goes on to suggest it is one of the most powerful parts of Django. Do you guys agree? How many people agree Django admin is one of the strongest parts of Django? I see. How many people agree that at some point it used to be at least one of the strongest, most powerful parts of Django? I see, exactly. I know, the feeling is about right. It has suffered a lot in the recent popular perception today. In Adrian Holavat's talk at Google in 2008 on the DjangoCon, he asked the question, how many people, since in the year 2008, when Django was such an important, Django admin was such a most powerful part, which brought a lot of people into using Django and thereby using Python itself, how does it fare today to the standards of 2013? So what all does Django get wrong? What is the popular perception of what are the things that Django admin is lacking in? As rightly pointed by somebody on the mailing list, it doesn't get the padding right. Can you see where the levels of the heading in the top header as well as the bottom header? The padding is